All right, we are up for our final presentation of the day. We are joined by Mr. Darren Manners. Darren is the co-founder of Red Spy 365, and he's going to introduce himself. So Darren, take it away.
Well, thank you very much. I guess I'm at the end of the day, I'm here to land the plane. So firstly, you're gonna kind of see a bit of a theme running through this. Someone might guess my favorite movie here. So who am I? I'm the founder of Red Spy 365. I created Red Spy to basically move pen testing from a photograph to a movie. It came about because I tested a company, and about 3 weeks later, they were breached. I was paranoid. I was like, what happened? Did I miss something? I didn't actually miss anything. What would happen was there was an exploit that came out about a week after I'd finished my testing. And I was like, man, we got to be able to do better. And obviously, my background is I'm ex-Navy intelligence. I've been doing this now since I was 19. I'm now 51, so I've been doing it for a fair amount of years. I hold all the top certifications. I'm a SANS CCI security, SANS GSE. I'm a OSCP, CISSP, CISA. I hold 12 other SANS certifications. But just take away that I really enjoy what I do. And the reason I understood that we needed to move offensive security forward, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But what do I mean by offensive security? I mean, we try to mimic the bad actors' playbooks, tactics, techniques, tools, policies, procedures, everything that we do. We try and work out what is the bad actor doing and try and mimic what the bad actor's doing. But that's kind of sometimes ends up like a circular firing squad. We're trying to mimic what other bad actors are doing, but that's only after we know what they're doing. So we know we need to move again slightly further forward. We also want to test the security defenses in depth. We want to make sure that you are the onion, not the egg. Some organizations, they have a hard candy shell. And then once we bypass that hard candy shell, they're kind of soft and gooey on the inside. So we want, you hear the phrase defense in depth, but really that's trying to be the onion, not the egg. But you want to test each layer of the onion as well. Don't just assume that just because someone can't get past one layer, that everything else will fall into place. You want to be able to test. And then we also want to show measurable impact to the organization. So pen testing is obviously uses some things that, say vulnerability scanning or some other tactics, that enumeration, reconnaissance use. But we want to show the impact. So not only do we want to say, hey, this is potentially vulnerable, but we also want to show the impact of that vulnerability. So we want to test it. And remember, security is a journey, not a destination. So why continuous? Why did I want to move from that photograph to the movie? Well, very simply was the bad guys are coming at you 24/7, 365. So you need to think accordingly. And in fact, Rob Joyce, who was head of tailored access operations at the time, he done a talk at Usenix and it kind of stuck in my mind. And he was saying, these guys are coming at you 24/7, 365. You got to think accordingly. And it always stuck with me because then we go away as a tester, we test once a year. And I was like, well, that kind of not exactly what the bad guys are doing. And if we think back, we got to mimic what the bad guys are doing. Then testing once a year, although better than testing nothing, is still kind of not doing what the bad guys are doing. So we have to think accordingly. And of course, the old mantra was if you change things, you retest. But to be honest, you don't actually have to change anything. The world around you is changing, quite a lot. New tactics, tools, techniques come out every day. How do you know that, something that's been delivered today isn't going to impact you, say, later on this afternoon or tomorrow? We've seen the time from, a vulnerability to exploitation, what we call weaponization and productization. We've seen that time move from like months to now days. Sometimes, literally hours after something gets released, the bad guys have access to it and they're attacking companies. So what is, when we talk about moving from a photograph to a movie, how do we do that? How do we go about? And I've been doing Red Spy now for 8 years. And I understood back then that you needed to create that baseline. So, the onboarding process, the initial pen test obviously becomes that kind of baseline. And then as things change, in other words, maybe you spin up a new system or a new application or a new risk comes out, you want to be able to test that change. But you not just have to look inside to the organization that changes occur, you've got to be able to look outside. And then you have to kind of repeat that process. It has to be continuous. So to move from the one-offs to continuous, you get the baseline, you kind of want to test the changes that occur internal and then external as well, and just rinse and repeat. So Red Spy, when I created it, it was designed to basically do that. The idea is we test, we identify, we report, and it's continuous. The difference is we have human analysts, so we are a service. We have tools, and we have what we call bots. To me, a bot is an event action trigger, and I'll show you later on how we look at that. But really, the idea here is to take the best of tools, best of breed tooling, and you'll hear about that quite a lot. And we'll be able to repeat that process continuously. So you've got bots, which I always talk about, and tools are great at repetitive actions, but they're not so good at interpretive actions. So sometimes they have to call the analyst in, whereas the analyst not so great at repetitive actions. So this is where tools and bots become into, sort of like their own little kingdom, because they're very good at repetitive actions, trying to find things. And then if they do need that interpretive aspect, again, call the analyst in. The other thing we start to do is we're able to add other things into the system, because now we've moved from that photograph to a movie, we can start to add in new things. We also want to be able to report those reports as well. So if you have, auditors, you want to be able to print off that pen test report. You want to be able to receive those alerts as new things come. And that's kind of important, because engagement becomes much more important as you move from a photograph to a movie. You have to understand that engagement increases, or we need engagement, because we may find new things and we need to alert people, as well as, people still need that traditional, hey, I need a new pen test or a pen test report, and they can go in to Red Spy and print it off on demand. So the other advantages kind of allured to at the last part there was, we're able to add threat intelligence into the mix, because now we're moving from the photograph to a movie, and because we're doing things continuously, we're starting to be able to add some other things in. So threat intelligence is one, artificial intelligence is another, and business intelligence is the last thing. All of this starts to provide context for me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to drop into threat intelligence. So threat intelligence is we use Intel 471, which is closed source intelligence. So this is the Red Spy portal. And here we're mapping, CVEs that we see. So kind of like what the exploit status is. So we have a couple of CVEs, so a couple of vulnerabilities that we identified that basically are available, weaponized, and productized. So that's something that we really should be concentrating on remediating, because we know the bad guys are doing something with this. We could also use threat intelligence to understand credential dumps and monitoring. Now, this is all closed source threat intelligence. So these are spies within the spy networks. But this enables us to sort of do the threat mapping, understanding credentials, and also be able to do breach alerts. So technology that we're working with, we might want to understand if that's going to impact us as well. So that's an extra thing that we can add in when we move from the photograph to the movie. The other thing I mentioned was the artificial intelligence. We call ours Trinity, ironically. And we call this also the augmented virtual pen tester. So when we start adding in sort of like what I consider, controlled object and understanding the controlled objects, most pen tests, when we do a pen test, we find a lot of technical failures, but they're usually as a result of a controlled object failure, like a policy or procedure. So what we do is we use SIG, standard information gathering from shared assessments, and that is 1,826 questions for a full SIG. But those map off to NIST, HIPAA, PCI, you name it, they map off to every compliance that's out there. What we did was, though, we understood that, hey, look, filling out 1,826 questions isn't kind of fun. But what we're able to do is upload our own policies and procedures, and then using AI, and we actually use Azure's ChatGPT, so it's secure. We also use cognitive search. So when we upload those documents, they get indexed into cognitive search, which enables me to ask questions against those. Now, like I said, standard information gathering from shared assessments, 1,826 questions. So it's a question already. But we can ask our augmented virtual pen tester, do we have an email policy? So we can just ask it a straight up question, And the good thing is it can actually go through the documents that we've already uploaded and actually answer those, compliance questions, and actually even cites the actual document. And if we click on the actual document, it'll actually bring us up that page of the document that's cited. That helps me out, and that helps out the client, because now we're starting to understand when the technical failures occur and we see them, what's the control object failure that's allowing that to happen? We can also obviously ask questions against the pen test report as well, maybe try to understand the CVE as well a little bit further. But the last part is talking about the business intelligence. So we can always look at, business intelligence from, business impact analysis. But what we like to look at is understand the whole chain. So this is Red Spy's sort of, business and compliance. We can understand here we've got a business process, maps to a product tech catalog that maps off to an asset. That asset has some risks on it. Those risks or some of those risks have mapped to what we call a significant event. We try to filter out events to significant events. And then we can understand, like we said, the control object, the root cause failure. In this case, this is an outbound web traffic question. We've got some control objects. Now, the AI can automatically fill out those questions for us. But we can also start to drill down a little bit further. So we can say, okay, I'm just only interested in this business process. So this is the asset that's affected. So now we're not just talking about a risk on a system. We're now starting to talk about the risk to the business processes. We're starting to talk about another different level. We also start to understand, okay, how does this risk, why is this risk occurring? What's the control object that's allowing that to occur? So again, as you move from the photograph to the movie, you're able to add that threat intelligence, the AI, which we use Trinity. And again, this is more about compliance. It aids in us understanding the context. We can understand the business intelligence. Again, root cause, we can start to understand metrics because, again, we're moving from a photograph to a movie. And we're able to ingest that institutional knowledge of business processes to give us the context around the risk. That's really important to understand because typically as a normal pen tester, I don't really understand the context. I go in, I test, I rely upon you to have that institutional knowledge. But as you move from the photograph to the movie, I can start to digest that myself. So in which case, when a risk occurs, I can start to understand what business process is affecting. So maybe a medium risk on a high priority business process now becomes more of a priority to fix than maybe a critical risk on the coffee pot. So that makes sense to me. So we're going to talk a little bit about some of the lessons I've learned because it kind of feeds into the direction of what we're doing. We require, I always think best of breed products. Best of breed products, they cut out the false positives to me. That's, I never set out to create the next vulnerability scanner. There's plenty of those out there. And to be honest, they have the corner or the market corner of those skill sets, of even like the development skill sets. So the idea for me was to have an ecosystem of best of breed products for both commercial and open source. And I'll talk about that in a second, why open source is kind of important as well. But we want to use those best of breed products because they have that deep development and skill set of those best of breed products. This is why you can never become everything or good at everything. So what I designed Red Spy to be was modular. So should tomorrow a fantastic new scanner come out, we can add it in. We're modular. The idea is I rely upon those best of breed products to do their development. So when people say to me, how many developers do we have? We have lots of developers because particularly every product that we integrate into has their own team of developers that are specific for that particular development of that product. So this is one of the reasons why we use best of breed. The other one is the offensive community especially is made up of tens of thousands of micro tactics, tools, techniques, exploits, procedures. We see those daily. You only have to go to GitHub and you see the new content out there all the time. And really what happens is, new content gets added. It's not necessarily a huge, massive tool, but it might be just one micro particular tool that can work. So if you're going to move from a photograph to a movie, you've got to be able to create something that can integrate into those tools rapidly. And that's part of what we did with Red Spy as well. I always made sure that when we add those or add the capability, adds that new content in, we allow for all that creativity. We don't say you have to use this particular language or you have to do it this way. And we'll talk about the orchestrator in a second. But because there's very few big players in the offensive market, what we found is that, the ones that started off maybe 10 years ago, they've tried to do everything. And I don't think you can do everything. I think you have to be able to specialize and bring those specializations in when you need to, because the idea is that we're going to show impact to an organization. We've got to bring the best. You've got to bring your A game. And in doing so, it may not be that you're going to be using one particular vendor for everything. So especially in offensive security, that's important. The other thing is you've got to be able to compare this new content to the new client risk all the time. So as new content comes out, you're not relying upon that one researcher or a team of researchers to go out and keep looking for the internet for the new things that are happening. We've got to make sure that we have an ecosystem that can absorb this new content and basically map it to the client's data set so that we can understand risk. So as these new things get added in, we start to understand the risk. And of course, client engagement. So when, typically when you go in a pen test, do a traditional pen test, you go in, you do your test, you leave, you may do a wrap up, may chat to them when you're there, start to understand culture, those kind of things. But really that's the engagement, engagement leaves. As you go from a photograph to a movie, engagement becomes very important, because now you're starting to find new things or new tactics, techniques. So you want to set up those cadence calls. You want to make sure that those alerting systems work. And that becomes more and more important, whether you can integrate into new ticketing systems like we integrate into ServiceNow, or you integrate into sort of login events or SIMs. We want to be able to integrate ourselves into that ecosystem that the client already has. And also, I think as well, part and parcel of was, as you go from the photograph to the movie, as you start to build up an ecosystem, you rely upon people adding content into the ecosystem. Back in my day, and I must say my day, I would say about 15, 10 years ago, it was really a lot of things were done for the kudos of your peers. Now those same kind of tactics, tools, techniques, etc., they're sold on the marketplace. And the idea is then, you've got to have a reward system. So if you do create anything, you have to create that reward system as well that goes along with it. And so this is really where the ecosystem comes into play. So, we said that, this is the client portal. This is where people work in the client system. We have what we call tool access portals. These are basically like mini app stores. So my analyst might have their own tool access portal. They can add content here and it becomes available for the agencies and clients underneath their control. We call those federated systems. It gives us a much bigger picture of 30,000 foot overview of all the agencies under their control. We can also add tools in at this level and they become available at a much lower level. And the uniqueness for us is the orchestrator. I can understand, I can add new content into the system very simply because we have an orchestrator that packages up the tactics, tools, techniques, the DNA of that security researcher, as it were. It packages it up in a format that Red Spy can ingest. So the Red Spy management portals can ingest. So I can create content here and it become available for all the agencies under that analyst's control. That becomes a force multiplier. So I always called this an ecosystem. I was thinking I should have called it the matrix really, but the idea is that we've had these analysts, building this content. The next phase for us is what we call the marketplace. This is where we're going to start to add in crowdsourced content. But in doing so, we're enabling something quite unique, I think. So to me, the marketplace is ability to be able to create teams where we can add content into the system. We can have services, but you can also create challenges for that crowdsourced system as well. If you think about it, crowdsourcing right now is like 1,000 people go attack this one IP address. Well, I'm going to say to those same 1,000 people, tell me how you would attack that same IP address. Put your content, your know-how, your DNA via our orchestrator into the marketplace and sell that into the system. That way, we can map the data set from the marketplace to the data set of the client and understand which might be effective. Now, remember, we're a service. So you can also, but we still talk about engagement being very important. So you can actually create challenges. I don't actually restrict a challenge. And in fact, if we look at the actual marketplace, I can sit there and this is coming out Q1. We're going to be releasing the first beta. but you can actually create challenges. So I can sit there and assign challenges. I can create a challenge in the marketplace. We actually have our own crypto fabric that sits over the top of this. So I can add content in. So security researchers or yourself even, you can add content into the marketplace. Again, it's captured via low code, no code orchestrators, but you can actually also create challenges. And you maybe can upload some log files and say, hey, what's going on here? Put out as a challenge, put some rewards system into it, and people can respond to that. The design is always to add, engagement, but always to add offensive security content into the marketplace, and thus be able to be available to you at the client portal level, so that you're always going to have latest content, always going to have the most effective content in the ecosystem, because that effective content is going to show you where those risks are. So it's very important to understand that, I always tell people content is king. Because, the worst thing than having a no pen test is having a bad pen test, saying you're okay when you're not. And as you go from the continuous, from the photograph to the movie, from the traditional to the continuous testing, you need to have that latest content in place. You need to be able to test knowing what the bad guys have out there. Now, the other thing we can also add is services. So complementary services, like you saw BIA there. You may want to press the easy button, have someone do it. But also the engagement side of things, where you can create your own teams to respond to other people's challenges. It's almost like the gamification of this as well, but it also has its own crypto fabric over the entire lot of this. But the challenges and teams create that engagement, and the content and services create that effectiveness for you. So imagine a simple comparison here is the iPhone and the App Store. The iPhone is a product and service, and it's a gateway to the App Store. RedSpy 365 is a product and service and a gateway to our marketplace. The iPhone is an ecosystem where new apps are created by outside developers. So much when I showed the ecosystem currently, it's my analysts creating that content. Well, imagine if only the Apple engineers were allowed to create apps for the App Store. You'd still get apps, but you wouldn't get as good apps. You wouldn't get as variety. You wouldn't get as an effective apps. Same with our ecosystem. People being validated and verified people being able to add content into the ecosystem enables more and variety and more effective content into the marketplace. And also we've got that reward-based system. So that crypto fabric, in fact, content is packaged up as an NFT and stored in our blockchain. So the idea there is that bad guys can't get access to the content. And if they do, it's not going to work because it has to go via the RedSpy client. So it's kind of a closed ecosystem, but an effective ecosystem with high engagement. The difference between where we stop from the iPhone and the App Store comparison is obviously we have our own orchestrator, we have our own crypto blockchain, we have our own crypto coin, Redcoin. We're able to create rewardable challenges for content creators. This becomes really effective when you've got places like universities that maybe can create challenges for their students that become student talent showcase, or you've got state agencies that can create challenges for those students as well, or maybe even you've got an organization, as I said, you can create a challenge that you might want a PowerShell script to do X, and you can put that out there as a challenge and someone can create it for you. So challenges are kind of very, very powerful. Also, we're able to sell their apps, those tactics, techniques, tools, and procedures, into the ecosystem. And also, like I said, we can also add complementary services in there as well. And it's all very strong. The whole ecosystem is very strong. But the idea is to add that effectiveness from the outside into the inside. So we end up with an ecosystem or stroke matrix where you can have content that's added to the management portal. You've got crowdsourced content that's made available to the management portal. You can create challenges in an engaging ecosystem, but it's all designed to test the effectiveness of your security controls. And as they change, to continuously test them. So the idea is that, we move from that photograph to a movie so that you start to understand everything and how it's effective. Our roadmap, we got the RedSpy Scout and Agga I'm not going to go too much into both of these, but they're super advanced. And like I said, when we launch the when we actually launch the marketplace, you'll be launching with some very interesting built apps ourselves, as well as crowdsourced content that we're going to be creating. We've got the Red Spy Academy. I always tell people the Red Spy Academy is kind of where we put our training. You can go to rsacademy.redspy365.com. It's self-sign up. You can log in and understand a lot more about Red Spy and what we do. We also have, as I said, the challenge and response and marketplace, and we've now completed the AI. We're going to expand AI into LangChain, so the effectiveness of Red Spy becomes a lot more. And we're now rolling out. So we finished our academy. We've pretty much finished our AI and machine learning, even though we're going to expand upon that. We're going to start, this last quarter to be able to add our Scout, add our marketplace and integration into OffSec as well, which is, I would say, a complementary service as well inside of our marketplace. And we hope to be launching version 15 Q1 2024. And hopefully the beta will go live slightly before that of the marketplace. So those that you are Red Spy clients already, you'll have access to the marketplace and be able to create challenge responses and kick the tires of that. We're also going to be sort of obviously doing a lot of promotion for the marketplace to our security researchers. That ends my talk here. Again, I thank you for listening to me. If you have any questions, please fire them to us or email me or send them to Jeff, Tom.
Darren, thank you so much. I tell you, every time that I hear you do that presentation, I learn something new about Red Spy 365. So thank you for that. I do have one question for you as we wrap up. What's an action that our listeners can take tomorrow because they listened to you today? What can they go do?
Well, I think the easiest one is to think about, moving from that photograph to the movie. How we've seen, I think it was interesting, the opening remarks were talking about, metrics and telemetry. Well, how do you move that if you're only testing once a year? So that's kind of really interesting to me, and obviously there was talk about how to get those business functions. And so hopefully we're answering a lot of those questions for you. And if you want those further discussions, I'm more than happy to talk about Red Spy and everything it brings.
Well, I love that metaphor of shifting from a photograph to a movie. And the other one that now is stuck in my head is that of an M&M with that hard candy shell. You want to be more than that. You want to go deeper than the hard candy shell. So, Darren, thank you very much for carving out time. I really appreciate it.
Thanks very much.